Good evening and a Happy New Year. The regular meeting of the Southern Shores Town Council for January the 9th, 2018 is now in session. Please join the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please join in a moment of silence. Thank you. Council, barring any amendments to this evening's agenda, I would ask for a motion to approve it.
So moved. Second.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris. All in favor? Aye. Aye. Motion is made and carried to approve the agenda. We have an agenda. Council need a motion to approve the consent agenda. Tab 1, council meeting minutes from December the 5th, and also budget amendment number 7, the cost to replace a crosswalk light. Recognize the revenue received from insurance company of vehicle responsible for damage to the crosswalk light. Do I have a second?
Yes. I'll second.
All in favor? Thank you. The consent agenda has been approved. Thank you. At this time, I'd like to introduce Bobby Dobbs and Dorothy Hester from Dare County. They're going to have a brief presentation for us. They're going to talk to us for a few minutes. Welcome, guys. Glad to have you here.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Dorothy Hester with Dare County Public Relations, along with Bobby Dobbs, who's the channels manager for Current TV, which some of you know and remember as GovEd Television. We appreciate this opportunity to update you all about the channel and share with your citizens about the programming that's available not only on the cable channels, but also on the internet. Current TV has expanded beyond the cable channels by making our programming available online to anyone with a computer anywhere in the world. We've received a lot of positive feedback about this from people who don't subscribe to Charter, and also the out-of-town property owners that can now access it. This past year, we began marketing the channel under the name Current TV, and although that name is new, we continue to maintain our commitment to offer quality programming that especially addresses things that are important to your citizens and citizens throughout the county. We do have a governing board, and we meet regularly to plan the programming and discuss how we can better serve viewers. Councilman Newberry is your representative. I appreciate his participation. He's a strong supporter of the channel and brings forward information back, from your council and from your town. So we do appreciate the feedback. And also Peter Rasco, who serves as our staff liaison. He's always helpful in helping us come up with good ideas and those type of things. At this point, I'm going to introduce Bobby Dobbs, who is the channel's manager, and he works with the governing board on a day-to-day basis. He's going to give you an overview of the channel and talk about what we've been doing and what's to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Dorothy.
There we go. Very good. Good evening. I'm Bobby Dobbs, Channels Manager for Current TV. Just want to talk with you a few minutes about what we're doing and where we're going with Current TV. We're real excited about it. Fred's been witness to some of those changes over the past year, and we're looking forward to some really neat things. The first thing I'd like to share with you is a video. It's very short and give you an idea of some of the kinds of things that have been on our channel just in the past year. Whoops, wrong thing here. Let's go back. My finger must have slipped. Let's try that again. As you can tell from that video, we are not just government, but we are also education as well. We are a collaboration, actually, to provide quality information programming through 2 channels, Current TV Government, Current TV Education, and those are all of our member entities there that you can see there. It's all of the 7 incorporated towns, Dare County, and then the 3 educational entities of Dare County Schools, College of the Albemarle, and UNC Coastal Studies Institute. There are 10 altogether. There are 2 channels, Current TV Government on Charter Spectrum Channel 191, Current TV Education on Charter Spectrum Channel 198. They operate 24/7. You can watch them anytime, 365 days a year. Each channel is streamed over the internet 24/7 and is accessible through our website at www.currenttv.org. I'll be showing you that in just a second. We also offer an extensive video on demand feature. This was made possible by our new website. We also maintain a YouTube channel, and we're also on Facebook. So I would encourage you to go to any of those locations and check us out. Just a little bit about how we're funded. I'm not going to get into a lot of detail here because it's kind of complicated, but essentially, each one of our participating entities or members pays $1,000 annually. This goes into a pot that gets distributed back out as budget to our operation. This gives access to provide content to the channels through those entities, and representation on the Government and Education Access Channels Committee. Each participating member has access to a fully equipped studio that we have in the offices in Manteo, local program development initiative grants, and then support from Current TV staff as well. Each government entity receives a quarterly distribution from the State of North Carolina Video Programming Distribution Unit of the North Carolina Department of Revenue. This is essentially what used to be the old franchise tax. It's still a franchise tax that comes off. If you have a cable subscription or a DirecTV subscription or any of that, a part of that bill goes to the State of North Carolina and then gets redistributed out to what they call PEG channels, public, education, and government channels throughout the state of North Carolina. We are one of those entities. So the money comes to the towns, our member towns and entities, and gets turned over to us, and where it gets redistributed out as budget for our operation. This distribution this gets a little complicated, but this distribution is based on a county's or city's proportional share of the certified amount of revenue from cable franchise fees and PEG channel subscriber fees for the first 6 months of the fiscal year compared to the statewide total for those revenues. So it's constantly changing. It's not a fixed amount every year. It does change, and we have to keep an eye on that to make sure it doesn't change too much. It usually doesn't go up, it usually goes down because there's more and more channels becoming part of this operation or this statewide entity. Current TV maintains an office in the administration building along with that studio. We also have a control room there and editing suites. We are part of Dare County's public relations office in Manteo. Dare County provides the office space, and we are managed by Dare County HR and the County of Dare, and we're actually considered employees of Dare County. But our money comes from the budget that we talked about earlier from the state and from the member entities. We don't receive any Dare County money except for that $1,000 that they pay to be part of the operation. Our website is www.currenttv.org, and I'm going to try to launch this now and see what we get here. Goody, very good. Okay, let me just take you through this. This is our new website that was launched in August of last year, this past summer. We're very pleased with it. We're very proud of it. It was done by OBX Media here locally. And they were very, very good to work with on this because we basically told them we want a video-based website that people can go to and interact with, and they can find out information about Dare County and the towns and the educational entities that make us up. And so we will also always feature a video on our website for different periods of times. It just so happens tonight to be Southern Shore. So how did that work out? I did not plan it that way. This video on demand section is something I'll go into a little bit more detail later, but we're very excited about this. This is a place you can go. If you don't want to go to YouTube and deal with all the stuff you have to deal with on YouTube, you can go here, see just about any video that's currently on our air right on our website, and you don't have all the clutter that you get with YouTube. You can also, it's all searchable and categorized. You can also watch our stream, either government or education, and you can get our schedules for government or education. And there's a little blurb about us. There's all our entities, and each of these entities logos are links to your websites, to your homepage on your website. And then at the bottom, there's these are some of the latest programs that we've uploaded to our website or to our air, and then of course a link to our Facebook page. So that's on the front page. I'm going to go a little deeper here and just kind of walk you through some of this. I want to show you this video on demand section real quick. And I can go down to, you see the other categories there. You can watch any Destination Dare episode that's been on in the last year, Dare County videos, there's Town of Southern Shores. And if I go over here and click, it'll show me all the videos that we currently have loaded for the Town of Southern Shores. And some of those you're probably familiar with. Some go back a ways, others are relatively new. So there's a good bit there from Town of Southern Shores. Y'all are doing a great job. Over on the side, you'll see updates for upcoming program notes and links to how to get to those. And right now, we're actually pushing a documentary that we produced called Oregon Inlet Shifting in the Tides. So if you're interested in that, you can check it out. The Watch Live section, you can go to this anytime, and hopefully it will, well, it's going to ask for Adobe Flash, so, and I don't have it on this, so I won't be able to show you that. But you can go here anytime. There's a page for our government channel. There's a page for our education channel. You can just click on the link, and then it takes you through. You stream it on any device. It'll work on my iPhone. Very cool. Program schedules too. We've got the government schedule right here. And a lot of our programming is little 5-minute segments. I don't put all of those in our schedule. These are the major program chunks that we carve out every day. But as you can see, there's quite a variety, and we do repeat things quite a bit. As you can see here, the Dare County Board of Commissioners meeting will be tomorrow afternoon at 1, and then again in the evening. And then on down towards next week, we've got the town of this meeting will be on next week sometime. You can click on any of these and get a little blurb about that program if it has something. It'll pop up a little thing about the program. So that's how you can use the schedule to find out what and when stuff is on. And then there's a place for you to contact us should you need to do that. There's my phone number and email address, and also our producer, Skip Wallace, who works with me to produce a lot of the content you see on the channel. We also use Benny Baldwin. Some of you probably know him very well. He produces a lot of the segments that Southern Shores produces for our channel and for Dare Destination Dare. Are there any questions that I could answer?
Counsel?
I've got one.
Okay.
Do you assist our police department in the video that they posted of, I think it was called the Murray? I don't know, our police officers may be able to help me on this, but I saw recently a video where they were basically giving kids $100 and taking them shopping. Did you assist them in that?
That is not currently on our air. I don't know if it's in production for something that we may show later. That must have been something the police department did on their own.
Okay, it was an outstanding video.
Yeah,
I just-
yeah. Something we'd be very interested in, so, yeah. Other questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Excellent presentation. I enjoyed that. I think we all did.
Get off of this. Got it? There you go.
Mr. Dobbs, I want to thank you and Dorothy for your coming out this evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
This time we'll have our staff reports. Town planner. Good evening, Wes.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I have a report for y'all tonight for the month of December. There were 4 zoning permits issued, 19 building permits issued. Those consisted of 4 additions, 4 remodels, 2 repairs, 1 addition remodel, 1 accessory, and 7 others. There are currently 25 single-family dwellings under construction in the town, and the total amount of fees collected in December was $4,466.68. With respect to the Town Planning Board, they will meet on January 16th. That's a Tuesday due to the holiday. And on the agenda, they will discuss side yard setback requirements for 50-foot wide lots. The board will also continue its discussion of Module 1 of the Town Code Update Project, and potential topics of discussion under that include parking requirements for rental properties, commercial design standards, relocating oceanfront homes, and Module 1 notes. Any questions?
Counsel?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I want to clarify something. I had a question. On our last meeting, we did ZTA 1705, the accessory building code.
Yes, sir.
The question came to me, we said, and I thought we clarified it, was you could have a sleeping or kitchen, but in reading the code, it says you can have both.
It's sleeping facilities or stove or ovens or stoves or stoves or ovens or stove or oven, singular. It's one or the other, it's not both.
The way it reads, and I looked at it, it's stoves and/or multiple stoves, ovens or ovens, and sleeping.
Are you referring to that's currently on MuniCode?
The code that's on the website under the calendar,
Under MuniCode?
the
or
one that was put up, yeah, after our last meeting.
The ordinance, we post the exact ordinance that you all adopted and approved on the website. I'll have to go back and double check. It's supposed to be, or it's what you all
That's
approved.
what I thought we did.
I think it's an and, because it's the definition of a dwelling unit. So you don't have a dwelling unit unless it hits the and all of them. So if it was an or, then you would have a dwelling unit if you had either or. But what you decided was that you
Well, it
had to
is-
have both, so it's an and.
Well, it's under the definition of dwelling unit.
Are you referring to the ZTA document that's posted on the website?
Yes.
Okay, we'll have to double check that and see if
My
that's,
recollection is that it is an and between them,
Right.
which has caused some confusion in the past, because the dwelling unit is it's a negative of the whether or not it's there. So if you have a dwelling unit, then you can't have that. And the way to have a dwelling unit is you have, with an and, it's like check boxes. You go down and check all 4 items, then you have a dwelling unit, and that's not lawful. But if you go down and check them, and one of them doesn't match, then you don't have the whole list, so you don't have a dwelling unit, so that is lawful.
yeah,
I
didn't-
understand what you're saying, but it's not clear to the public. And that's where the concern came in, was it says and, so you can have both. So there's going to be
Is
some.
it confusion that you can only have one dwelling unit per lot?
If I may go try to answer the question again, I didn't follow your question. It does say and, but the definition, if you go to the other section that's in the amendment, it says you cannot have a dwelling unit. We're allowing accessory structures that do not contain dwelling units. Therefore, you do not want to have a dwelling unit that has sleeping and an oven or stove or ovens. It's intended to be or, but the actual language says and. And that is the intent.
Okay, and I understand that, but it needs to be clarified.
We can, okay.
I don't know how to clarify it, but I'm just saying,
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how to clarify it other than it is.
It is a
You have to
concern.
read it all in context to grasp that the and means you've got to have all of those things for it to be unlawful, which would be that it would meet the standard of a dwelling unit.
and that was another question I had was posed to me. How many dwelling units can I put on my property if I'm under the 6,000 square feet? And,
One.
One.
It doesn't say that.
That's in another section of the code.
Okay, but I guess my question is, are we setting ourselves up like we did when we had to grandfather all those other buildings to where we're going to create situations or we're going to have to come back and fix them? Do
I
we
don't
need
believe
to-
so. I think the ordinance, the language was written and it will do what it's intended to do.
Okay, so it's in an RS1 area and you put a dwelling unit out there, does that make it multifamily?
You're not allowed to have more than one dwelling unit per lot, and the definition of multifamily dwelling unit would be more than one dwelling unit per lot. A multifamily is not allowed in the RS1 district.
I understand that. And
So in another section of the RS1 requirements, it states only one single-family dwelling allowed per lot. It's not in the same section.
Maybe can we
Okay,
update
so
that?
clarify this, I guess we go all the way back to where this came from. The individual requested to be able to put another dwelling unit out on his lot so he could live there, his kids and their family could move into the house. That would be an accessory building, that would be a dwelling unit and a dwelling unit on one lot. That'd be multifamily, would it not?
It would be, but that's not what we're allowing. If it meets the definition of the dwelling unit, which what we were explaining was if it contains sleeping facilities and a stove or oven. If it doesn't contain sleeping facilities and a stove or oven, it doesn't constitute a dwelling unit. Therefore, it's allowed to go living space within an accessory structure.
So that person could that individual could have a separate structure. They could sleep
With a
there.
bed,
Bed there,
bathroom,
microwave.
microwave. You
And
just
that
couldn't
would be no
have sleeping
problem.
facilities and a stove or oven.
Right. Now, if that same person said, we don't want to live there, we want to turn that into a cabana, they could put another oven there, but then they couldn't sleep there.
They could have an oven, but they couldn't have sleeping
They couldn't
facilities.
sleep there, yeah.
You could have one or the other, not both.
But it's a good point but Gary brings up a good point. Maybe in that rumor or fact section of the website,
You should
we can do it like a description of that a little bit.
see code so-and-so, which is you can't have more
Hopefully,
than
the code
one.
hopefully the final format of the code update will be a lot more clear, and it'll have references to other sections.
Because I'm assuming if I'm building a unit out there and putting a bathroom in it, or a sleeping, and no stove, I have to go through a health inspection again and get a septic upgrade if I need it. Am I correct in that?
You would, yes, sir?
As well as parking?
The parking for the entire lot, for accessory use, principal use, whatever, all falls under the requirements based on the septic capacity for the structure. We used to be, or a lot of locations used to base parking requirements on number of bedrooms. The state legislature changed that. We now regulate parking based on septic capacity. So if there's already a single-family dwelling, that's a septic capacity of 8, let's say, right now, and they wanted to do a garage, this garage downstairs, living space above, and wanted to increase that septic capacity by 2. Therefore, they'd have to have another parking space to meet that, for it to be allowed.
And I guess Chris had a good point, and I'm going to restate it. When we finish this code rewrite, we need to have, this code C, section so-and-so that applies to your septic, that applies to your RS1 and those things, so people don't think they can do, because just reading that code, people are thinking they can put multi-buildings on their lot if they're under their 6,000 square feet and their 30% coverage.
It could be confusing, and yes, it is hard to, if you don't know where you're looking, you're not going to see all the requirements. And what I understand, the final format of the code update will include references and links to certain sections that apply to what you're discussing.
And just as a caution, I usually don't include references or cross-references, because as soon as you start including references and cross-references, whenever you make changes, then you have to find all the references and cross-references. And it does, you have to read the ordinances in context with the entirety of the code anytime you read it. And the hardest codes I've ever used to follow were the ones that had the most cross-references.
I understand.
Because
And I thought about what you said.
it sounds a lot easier, but it makes it a lot
But
harder.
when I was being questioned about this, I thought about what you told us back, and when we were doing that grandfathering was, we can make a mistake. And I thought, okay, have we made a mistake here, and we need to rewrite this and revisit it and bring it back and put it all together. And I'm just wondering if we need to wait and pull that whole code update together and have everything final before we do any more of them, because it's sending a mixed message to our community. Just a thought.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, Wes, when we do code updates like this particular one, does the code rewrite contractor, is he going to rewrite this and put it in context with all the other codes that are being updated?
We have to send him, since we've chosen to address these topics that the planning board and you all have discussed to deem as critical. As they've been approved, we submit them to the contractor, and yes, they will be incorporated into the final product, Module 1, and then finally the final product of the entire code.
Yeah, because I thought the bottom line of contracting with this firm was to make our codes easier to read and not be so confusing like
Yes, sir. Well,
discussing tonight.
like I said, the way it's being handled now, we're addressing these critical issues. We send them to him, and it will be a completely different format than what we have today in MuniCode.
Well, I agree with Gary. I mean, citizens are calling us and complaining they don't understand what it's trying to say, and, you read it literally, and, not discounting what Ben said, it is confusing.
Well, between staff, the planning board, and yourselves, we've certainly reviewed it numerous times, and we can certainly go back and look at any ordinance you all want us to look at again. You all have, once it's approved, it's gone through the process, but if you want to make things, clarify things, then we can certainly go back and look at that.
Well, the biggest concern I've heard on this one is, are you changing my residential, my RS1 to a multifamily community by putting an accessory building out there for someone else on my block? And how does that affect my insurance? How does that affect my property value and those kinds of things? So, I mean, there's people who, their concern was, they didn't read it until after, they didn't come to the meeting. I understand that. And then they read the code and they went, wow, you can put bed and stove in there now.
We can, it's one or the other, bed or stove, but we can certainly
That's why I asked.
we can certainly go back and look at anything you all want us to address.
Wes, I have a question. Are you getting inquiries from the residents about this? Are you hearing, are you getting a number of calls, any calls at all about these questions that Gary's asking tonight?
Since it was approved, no. No, sir.
Just curious. Thank you. Anything else, Councilman? Thank you, Wes. I appreciate your reports tonight.
Thank you, Wes.
Yes, sir.
Our Police Chief, David Cole. Good evening, David.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. The December 2017 Police Department's report, we had 1,506 calls for service. As you can see up here, there's a breakdown. The incidents, which are actually crimes that were reported for December, we had a total of 23. We had 4 criminal arrests for the month. 2 were drug-related, the other 2 were traffic-related. We had 2 motor vehicle accidents. That'll increase this month. Citations. Officers made 61 traffic stops, and out of those 61, they issued 20 written citations and another 12 warning citations. And we had 3 village town ordinance violations as well. Just a couple of other things. One of the council members had mentioned a video. That video is actually on the Outer Banks Voice. Benny Goodwin, Benny, I believe, is the one that put that together. That, I believe, is the 8th or 9th annual, used to be Shop with a Cop in honor of Sergeant Earl Murray, who was killed from Nag's Head. And we had several officers, as well as now what they call it is Shop with Public Safety. There's fire, EMS, and law enforcement. And we had several officers that participated in that and have ever since they've started it. And it is a very heartwarming thing to do for some of these kids. It's all set up through DSS, and Mrs. Murray is the one that organizes it. Cops don't have cash. They don't hand them out $100 and say, just go buy something, but they have a $100 limit for each child. Everybody is screened through Department of Social Services. And it's a very rewarding to be able to do something like that just before Christmas. Just a couple of things that some of those will be reflected in January's police report, but regarding the snowstorm, I can tell you that several trees were down, and I got a feeling that the fire chief can tell you exactly how many were down because they were the ones removing them. We had several motor vehicle accidents, and we had several motor vehicles throughout the town that had run off the road into the ditches, et cetera, et cetera. The one good thing is we had no injuries in any of those. Do you have any questions? Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Chief. Appreciate it. Our Fire Chief, Ed Limbacher. Good evening, Ed.
Good evening, everybody. Fire Department report for December 2017. Total of 47 calls, 5 patient assists, 31 EMS calls, 1 motor vehicle accident, 1 gas leak, 2 service calls, 4 public safety or 4 public service, 2 cover-up or standby, and 1 carbon monoxide detector with no CO detected. I would mention a couple little things. There were several trees down. We were fortunate they were not real big, so we didn't have to really call Mark. I think Mark was involved in a couple of them, but for the most part, we could clear most of them. But I did want to mention that there was a structure fire Sunday night on Hillcrest, which I thought the guys did a phenomenal job. I was actually away out of town, and it proved pretty difficult fire because it was very elusive. It was under the crawl space was very difficult to get to. They couldn't see it from the outside. Really smoky in the house, but just no fire showing itself. And that's the kind of thing that's, for me, that's very, very dangerous and worrisome. Because if you go in there, step on a floor, you could collapse something. It's very, very, very dangerous at that point. But I did want to say that the guys were very diligent in their search. Didn't just start cutting the house apart. They had a really good idea where it was, cut a 4x4 hole in the basement or in the first floor, and literally put about 10 gallons of water on it. It was out. But it was a good hour search to find it. And I thought they did a really good job with the freezing temperatures. They had lines off, they had the hydrant hit, so they were flowing water, so it was very difficult. But I thought that was definitely worth noting, so. Anybody have any questions?
Thank you, Ed. I watched most of what you just talked about.
Oh, okay.
It's right across the street from where I live.
Good, good.
And I only saw one officer, one fireman go down on the ice, but there was a number of them came close. It was a very, very difficult, extremely difficult
It was. They
situation.
also had Jeremy and Daryl also helping pull hose around, because it's very difficult when everything turns to ice, and it's just, people can get hurt very easily. So I was glad nothing happened. They did a very good job on it, so.
Yeah,
I
we
was
saved
very happy.
we saved some good neighbors there.
Yep,
Good
yep, they were
people.
very, very lucky, so.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Town manager report, Peter?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Short manager's report tonight. I did want to report to you that the current fiscal year's capital street projects that are under contract now are Palmetto Lane and Skyline Road projects that you approved. Both of those call for a finish date of May 23rd. The bid opening for your clamshell trail rebuild is on Thursday, this coming Thursday. So when that goes under contract, it'll also have a May 23rd completion date as well. We're still waiting on Camel Major permit for the Yopon Trail capital project that council approved. Hopefully that'll come in time for us, as I said before a couple of times, we can get something under contract with that prior to the end of the fiscal year. The council approved beach profile survey is being wrapped up. I was informed by the contractor today, the coastal engineer, that hopefully they will have it ready to come and present to y'all, to this council in March. Also, I'd like to, the clerk and I will be researching some providers and proposals for the GovEd channel funding for this year, and we intend, unless council would like to direct otherwise, we intend to apply for funds for enhancement for the microphone system in this room. That's been the plan all along for this current year. So unless council would like to direct some other aspect for those monies, that's what we intend to apply for at this point. Also, finally, I did speak to the mayor this afternoon. The council had adopted its meeting schedule for the year. The October meeting, I will have a conflict with the October meeting due to a family commitment, so we can check on that, revisit that in August if you like, to see what type of agenda items you have. But I just wanted to give council a heads up on that way in advance. If there are any questions, I'll be glad to answer them on town operations.
Council?
I've got one. Is the major camera permit for Yopon, has it hit a roadblock at the Corps of Engineers?
We haven't been notified of any problems with it. It was extended, the second 75-day period was extended, as is typical, but we haven't been notified that there's any problems with it. The agency says it's going to be issued, so I'm not aware of any problem.
Okay.
I got a question. I noticed that some of the Public Works folks were trying to remove some of the snow today on some of the streets in town, and I assume they've been going over quite a few streets, and that's good. But my question is, why weren't we trying to clear those streets shortly after the storm before they became packed down and iced over?
They were iced over before they were, snow went on. And that's if you've seen all the news reports that DOT's put out, it gives an explanation of why we're unable to remove the ice once it goes on that thick. We did prep ahead of time, as DOT did, in certain spots in town with saline, with salt solution. And once it rains, that's gone away. Once that ice goes down, we have to wait for it to slush like it did today before we can get it up.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
Can you tell me how close we are to being finished with the East Dogwood infiltration basin plantings? I think we're getting pretty close to the finishing, but I just want, if you had any
To
further.
my knowledge, I think it is completed. And there may be some shrubs that still need to go out there, but to my knowledge, it's complete.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Town Attorney, Ben?
I don't have anything to report, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Board report of the Planning Board and Council directed consideration of town code regulation tree removal from private property. I'll call on Board Chairman Williams this time. Good evening, Sam.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. One of the critical issues that was identified in reviewing Module 1 of the Town Code update was tree cutting on private property. Just as a little background, tree cutting is a complex, divisive, and difficult issue with a long history of concern. I talked to somebody who said that for at least 20 years it's been an issue. And if you're looking at the number of lots that are impacted, the town has just under 2,600 lots, and about 20% of those are undeveloped. That's about 475. Some of those lots are owned by SSCA and CPOA, and some of those lots are small enough they'll never be developed, and also because of the nature of SSCA and CPOA, I doubt if they'll ever be developed. The oceanfront lots, tree cutting doesn't seem to be a big issue for oceanfront lots, so there's a few there that won't be, the issue of tree cutting isn't a thing. Right now, the town code does not address tree cutting on private property. That's either before or after construction or development, whatever you want to call it. Two zoning text amendment proposals have been brought before the planning board in 2015, and that's the most recent ZTA proposals involving tree cutting that came before the board. The board recommended non-approval of both, and council agreed to go along with that. The considerations or decisions that need to be discussed or were discussed when the planning board reviewed this whole issue is, first of all, the town code update project. One of the survey questions was, and this is, I'll quote it, "The town code should regulate tree removal as part of construction on private property," close quote. 42% of the respondents disagreed or strongly disagreed with that. 51% agreed or strongly agreed, and 7% didn't care. If you want to look at those numbers in a different way, we had just under 2,600 total lots, one lot per survey, or one submission per lot for the survey. So if you take that 753 survey responses away, it still leaves a little over 1,800 lots that weren't represented in the survey, even though the survey had pretty good response. That's a total of 71% of the lots in town. And the 753 survey responses represent just under 30%, 29% of the lots. And also, in just thinking about this, it's not clear how many of the respondents define tree removal as clear cutting, because tree removal can be selectively done. There are valid reasons for regulating tree cutting, and I think we know most of them. Provides habitat for birds and other animals, enhances air quality, reduces topsoil erosion, reduces stormwater runoff, reduces noise pollution, saves energy by acting as a windbreak, and provides shade, and provides privacy. And I think we all know those pretty well. But there's also some valid reasons for allowing tree cutting on vacant lots. A lot of access for maintenance, for example, removing dead or dying trees, preparing a lot for sale to make it more attractive or accessible for viewing, lot access for bulkhead construction, thinning out trees to allow desirable trees to grow better, recreation or personal enjoyment of a vacant lot, and it's further complicated by if you have one owner of two side-by-side lots and a dwelling on one lot and he wants to use the other for recreation. If you start thinking about buffers between lots and things like that, you have to wonder about how you want to cover that in any ordinance. Also, even with clear-cut lots, after 2 or 3 years, the lots still look pretty good, maybe very suburban looking and not like we would like the character of the town to be, but they still look pretty good. And also, contractors are rarely, if ever, asked to clear-cut lots. We have heard rumors that there are a few contractors, very few contractors, that recommend to their clients that they clear-cut a lot to make it easier to build on. As far as the Module 1, they presented 6 different approaches for considering tree cutting. The first was no regulation. That's our current situation here in town. Then there's voluntary incentives for tree retention, and that's another approach, and that's voluntary incentive might be credits towards meeting landscaping requirements. Currently, Southern Shores does not have any landscaping requirements. And if we did do it that way, would we want to put in landscaping requirements, and that would increase regulation. The third approach would be mandatory tree retention during construction. For example, keep all trees over a certain size. One of the towns here in the county has a requirement that you keep all trees over 6 inches. 6 inches on my hand is about the spread of my hand. Now, somebody like Tom, who has much bigger hands, he would only have to put up 2 fingers or something, but basically 6 inches. Anything over 6 inches had to be saved on a lot until a site, a site plan was submitted and approved. Mandatory reforestation. That's where you cut one, you have to plant 1 or 2 or 3, and you can also specify sizes of the plantings or the species. So if you want to cut trees, maybe you want to say, we don't want anything but dogwoods and live oaks or whatever. The fifth approach is mandatory retention of specific trees both during and after construction. And the sixth approach is mandatory retention of a percentage of all existing tree canopy cover, both before and after construction. And other things that we consider property rights. Tree ordinances are common, but many of the 130 survey comments on this question were related to property rights. If you go back to the survey and look at the summary, each question has the colored bar charts, and The second page has usually several responses, written responses. And one of them that I wanted to read was, although I strongly dislike clear cutting of lots, I don't agree with unilaterally altering one's property rights. There were many of those property right sorts of comments that were made. If the town regulates tree cutting, I think we have to recognize that clear cutting is different from selective tree cutting. You have to decide what size trees to save, greater than 6 inches, greater than 10 inches. Heritage trees or the very large old trees, and how do we handle those? A lot of those heritage trees are live oaks, which have multiple trunks. And when you get down to these trees, how do you measure them? A lot of measurements are done at diameter of breast height, which is basically 4.5 feet. But there are some ordinances that have the measurements taken for certain things at a foot above ground level. Some consideration is given to trees in buffer zones. And in addition to considering what you want to do with the other vegetation in buffer zones, you run into issues like side load garages with driveways on or close to the property line. What does that do to your buffer zone? And also some of these buffer zones could interfere with stormwater retention systems. You've got to consider what you have to do with hazardous trees. And those can be the dead and diseased trees, but also some of these very tall trees, pines particularly, that the tops blow out of, or after a lot of wet weather, they blow over. And trees that can impact the location or design of houses. Also, you run into issues of impact on adjacent lots. For example, is if you clear cut a lot in a wooded area, it impacts, it's hard to believe, but it impacts lots adjacent to the clear cut lot. It has to do with the way the winds do it, and I think that's what happens with Councilman Newberry's lot. You have to consider stormwater. Trees reduce soil erosion and slow stormwater runoff. They impact the access to the rear of the dwelling. If you put in a requirement for a buffer zone or not cutting trees within so many feet of the lot lines, you may make it impossible for somebody during construction to get to the back of the house to do work that they want to do. Also, developed versus undeveloped lots. Right now, if you want to do something after a lot has been developed, you can cut any tree you want. So if we put in requirements that says you can't cut trees of a certain size or in a buffer zone, and they comply with that, as soon as they get the CO, they can go in and they can cut any tree they want. Unintended consequences, clear cutting of lots proposed before a proposed ordinance is finalized. Impact on contractors and lot or the homeowner. Costs are increased. Hampers the ability to do the job. The future impact on the owner. Again, a lot of those can be done away with because there's no requirement after a lot is developed. Just the administrations of the ordinance. Are trees required or not required on site plans? And if so, what size and so on. It's going to increase the cost and time required to get a permit. And you got to look at is whether the regulation is too complex to be easily administered or easily enforced. And how much discretion does a town manager or his designee have to adjust the requirements? If you remember, in the stormwater, we ran into that where there was no discretion, and so we had to worry about that. And also, as an aside, during our discussions, tree cutting in town right-of-ways came up, and we didn't know it at the time of the first discussion that Section 28-4, which is not in the planning section, but the town has to issue permission. Let me reword this. Town permission is required to remove vegetation in a town right-of-way. And also retention of trees in the right-of-way during road rebuild processes has been a problem. And I think because of the issues that have come up, the process has gotten better, and that was attested to by a member of the planning board. So, the bottom line, currently the town code does not have any regulation on tree cutting on private property, and the planning board recommends no change to the town code. In addition, the planning board recommends that the town council, A, reiterated its support for maximizing preservation of existing trees within the right-of-way during road rebuild projects, and B, with the permission of the town, maintain the ability of property owners to remove trees in the right-of-way in front of their property. And that is the planning board report on tree cutting on private property. Are there any questions?
Council?
Yeah, I have one. Did you, by chance, look at Duck's ordinance on vegetation and talk to some of the people up there?
We did.
primarily the
I
town?
didn't talk to anybody, but we looked at the duck ordinance, and it is a pretty detailed ordinance, going from definition of tree and clear cutting. I believe duck, I think it's duck, definition of clear cutting is not cutting anything over 6 inches in diameter, where most people, I think, of clear cutting as basically taking every piece of vegetation off the lot, from lot line to lot line. Duck also requires a permit to remove trees, and acts harmful to trees, such as putting up signs and so on, is prohibited. They have a requirement for tree canopy cover. There's a requirement for preservation of special or heritage trees. And I believe there's something about protection of vegetation both during and after construction.
Yeah, it's a very comprehensive ordinance. It's been in place almost 10 years. And the people that I've talked up there, I'm not talking about citizens, but people that on their planning board up there and some of the town officials have said it's been very effective, and the community has supported it very well. And for our planning board not to make a recommendation for some kind of vegetative ordinance or regulation, I think is premature, because we have probably one of the most desirable neighborhoods in our communities on the Outer Banks, and that's a lot of it's because of our trees. And I know over on Dogwood Trail, I mean, that's the ambiance of the community over there, is the trees. And for us to turn and look the other way and not make an effort to preserve these trees, I don't think we're doing the town fair. I really don't. Our land use plan, everything is associated with Southern Shores being a quiet seaside community with a maritime forest. We have one of the few maritime forests left. Now, it's a disrupted maritime forest because we've built homes in it, no doubt about it. But it still has a lot of the attributes of a maritime forest, and the benefits you went over. I agree with you completely. The benefits far outweigh the disadvantages. And I think most of the people in your survey, obviously, the results of it indicated that most of the people that live in Southern Shores, especially in the wooded areas, that's why they're there, is because of the trees. And I strongly encourage the planning board to go back and reconsider their recommendation. I think you'll find that it's doable. And don't get me wrong, I'm all for property owner rights. I don't like being dictated to, but there are certain things that we accept when we move into a community like this. And I think preservation of our maritime forest and trees and vegetation are critical to the ambiance of the community.
Well, I have to disagree with you. As I mentioned, these regulations that we currently have been in place for a long time, and there's been very little push by people building or developing lots for clear cutting. And yes, there have been some. Also, the point that the contractors that were at the meetings on the planning board indicated that they had never been approached by anybody to clear cut a lot. And I know that lot owners, when they are encouraged not to cut trees. And so I don't think that after looking at all this information that the planning board would change its opinion. Now, these are the planning board's recommendation. As with other recommendations, if the council wants us to go back and put in a regulation, that's your prerogative, but the planning board would need some guidance. So, I don't know what the council would like to do.
Is this recommendation from the planning board connected with the code rewrite process?
Yes.
Well, then if we adopted an ordinance as part of the code rewrite, isn't that more ordinances, and where the original mission was to just consolidate and make the town codes easier to read?
It's my understanding that the code update was to bring it up to date as far as state and federal changes to make sure that we were in compliance there, to make it more understandable to citizens, and the planning board was asked to review Module 1. And in Module 1, there's a piece in there where the contractor had said basically, there's nothing in here about tree cutting. Here are 6 options that we think you ought to consider. And the planning board considered those options, plus a lot of the information that I had laid out, and came to the conclusion that we didn't think that we needed to recommend anything on tree cutting,
So the bottom line is, it's not really what was originally presented for the purpose of the code rewrite and adopting a new ordinance.
I guess I don't understand your question.
The intent of the code rewrite was not to adopt new ordinances on any subject. It was to consolidate and make the whole code rewrite, or our town codes, easier to read. This argument has been made up here
to clean
before.
it up.
What?
It's to clean it up.
It's to clean it up, not
Yeah,
add new regulations.
But in the code rewrite, they listed 6 options about tree removal.
Yeah.
which
Well, there's
Sam's
other-
gone, which.
There are other options out there.
Right, I understand. Yes, you're right. But what he did, he gave 6 options. You do nothing, you do this, you do this, you do this. And I guess your recommendation, or the board's recommendation is we do nothing.
That's
Leave it like it is.
the board's recommendation.
That's what I'd like to do at this point, do nothing on this.
Well,
Can I just make,
This is an extremely complicated subject.
can I just make one statement? I'll let you finish. I think history's on our side here. Southern Shore's been around for a long time. We've had no restrictions except voluntary compliance with tree removal. We've never taken a hard line that you can't take any tree out and vice versa. We've been successful. Mr. Newberg just pointed out what a tremendous tree canopy we have here, what a tremendous amount of vegetation we have in our town. I think history's proven that our policy is working. We're not becoming a community of no trees because of our policies. In fact, just the opposite. We're seeing trees take over every lot that's vacant in big numbers. I think since you don't ask us to make take any action, I'd be in favor of taking no action on this and leaving the planning board's findings where they are. That's my take on it.
Councilman Newberry disagrees with you, and what I'm saying as planning board chair, this is our planning board's recommendation.
Right.
If the council desires something else, I need some guidance on what the council wants to do.
I understand that.
I
understand
agree
that.
with your recommendation.
I disagree with your recommendation further because you indicated at the beginning of your presentation the results of the survey that was taken by the code rewrite contractor, and it sounds like to me the majority of the citizens want some kind of ordinance or regulation. And so,
To answer the survey.
The survey represented 753 lot owners out of a total of just under 2,600 lot owners.
well, regardless, it's still a majority of the people that responded. So
It is.
that's the best indication you got of what the people want. Now, I agree with you. Statistically, it would have been much more significant if you had 2,800 people responding, but they didn't. So you had 700. So what are you going to do? Throw those out and ignore those people? That's what you're saying.
well, I'll just add one thing. We do have a section of our community that trees are not an issue.
I agree, we do.
The beachfront and back through to the dunes almost, there's an area there where trees are not an issue. So, it's not really important to some people answering the survey.
That's true.
But you do have a majority of people, 51%, that responded. So, we might need to look at something. The only thing I for one, I think our oaks, we need to protect as much as we can. We've been lucky, I agree. We've got a good, but